Our second speaker is Mr. Ryan Hassan. Mr. Ryan Hassan is Executive Director of the NGO Forum on the Asian Development Bank. He has a Master's in Social Change and Development from UOW, Australia. He regularly engages the ADB and the China-led Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, bringing these two institutions issues and concerns of grassroots communities from South and Central Asia to East and Southeast Asia regarding the social, economic, and environmental impact of the ADB and the AIIB infrastructure project. So we now turn over the screen to Mr. Ryan Hassan.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, I'll just share my screen and get on with the PowerPoint. Can the host give me access to share my screen? Thank you. Okay, just give me a second. All right, I'll try to do this quickly. So the theme in which I will generally speak would be about social enterprise and community resilience and a path towards pandemic recovery. Hopefully we can get there. So basic terms and concepts, and you guys are experts in your field, so it's just a bit of a review. When we use the term social entrepreneurship, we're talking about two words. We're talking about society and we're talking about entrepreneurship. And social entrepreneurship can be defined as prioritizing social benefits over profit maximization. It is also defined as the implementation of change from social capital to social benefit. And we'll come to what we mean by social capital as we look at the examples and cases later on in the presentation. Now, the key question which we want to address, at least for my input here, would be, can social entrepreneurship positively correlate to building community resilience? And hopefully the case studies which I'll share with you can shed light on that positive correlation. But before going into that, I think the state of the world really needs to be talked about just a little bit. As you know, as a civil society network across Asia, we're looking at macro development finance initiatives by the ADB, by the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. We're also looking at the IMF and the World Bank very closely on how they're responding to the COVID crisis. One thing as of July 2020 we're noticing is a lot of central banks have lowered rates and flooding their domestic markets with liquidity. There's a lot of cash. There's just a lot of cash flowing from governments into the market just so that the economies don't collapse because of these lockdowns. We're seeing it in the US with the Federal Reserve, and I just noticed today that even in the Philippines, the Banco Central Filipinos lowered its interest rate as well, and making sure that there is enough cash in the system. But if we don't roll back on this appetite of taking on liquidity, we might risk hemorrhaging the system altogether. What would this mean at the local level? This would mean that the prices of basic commodities will go up, and that's something I think we should all be mindful of. We're also looking at, the typical scenario that a lot of sectors which used to supply labor and goods and services from Asia to European and US markets can't do so. The overseas Filipino worker is seen begging in the streets. The ready-made garment sector worker in Bangladesh is revolting because the factories are shut down. And I think these stories you will also hear in Nepal with tourism shutting down. In Thailand, tourism has shut down. So middle income and lower income countries are really struggling when we look at the working class. The other thing that we noticed in the last 2 decades is this this idea that infrastructure was an asset class of investment for private investment, not necessarily that you're building a road which is connecting a village home to the hospital. That is not what was being built. So there was a lot of ports, a lot of gas pipelines. As Professor Reneo said, a lot of these banks are doing big base load power generation projects in fossil fuels. So what are we left with? We are left with a rural community which is pushed towards disenfranchisement, landlessness because of large-scale infrastructure, and eventually leading to rural to urban migration looking for a livelihood. Now, if we want to counter this, if we want to really counter this, we have to go back to our agrarian base and figure out what solidarity means for us. And this has been attacked. This has been attacked by the neoliberal project over the last 10 to 15 years, if not more. But we are also noticing that COVID-19 recovery loans, I think the ADB announced a $20 billion loan package for Asia, for the Philippines, that stands at a staggering $2 billion loan at a 2% interest rate, which is the cheapest loan ever given to the Philippines government. And you notice a lot of that money actually going towards the private sector. And if you look at the private sector, they're talking about health recovery, but through private sector. They're talking about energy access, but through private sector. Now, what it means when it goes into the hands of the private sector, especially for basic needs such as energy, health, education, it means user fees. And user fees are basically a barrier towards access. So what we want to talk about is how communities can access their health, can access their food, can access their education, and what are the financial systems that we are looking at up ahead which can ensure that, or what needs to be challenged. So the question of social enterprise and building community resilience right now is up front and center, not only to ensure survival of these communities in these difficult times, but also making sure that the pathway towards recovery is built on the principles of inclusivity and free access on these very, very life-supporting sectors. All right. So what do we mean by social capital? And I'm using some of the literature which came from Thailand in a journal known as the Asia Pacific Social Science Review. And they defined it very nicely. They talked about social capital to have elements of trust, a spirit of citizens, solidarity, eagerness, and participation of the community. These elements employed the concept of social capital to explain class relations, arguing that it can strengthen the power of a group to perform social actions to create political change and economic empowerment. So I'll bring you to some cases where these principles have been applied, and hopefully it will help unpack some of these technical terms a bit more easier. Let's take this lovely lady, RANI MISTRI. She's 45 years old. She's an innovative, very innovative farmer. She's from Southwest Bangladesh, which is a highly saline-prone area opening up to the Bay of Bengal, always hit by cyclones, very vulnerable to sea level rise. And ALPONA'S passion was actually cultivating vegetables, and it was homestead gardening. And after Cyclone Aila and Cyclone Sidor, which hit the Sundarban mangrove region multiple times over the last decade, she realized that the local market was being flooded by commercial seeds, agricultural seeds coming in from China. And the Bangladesh government, the World Food Program, and FAO, Food and Agricultural Organization, had set up quite a government-led elaborate system which was not supporting local seeds and local fruits and vegetables. And local agriculture was completely dependent on the local, on the state-led market. And she wanted to basically resist that because now the cost of inputs because of the cyclone went very high. So buying seed was not something she was able to do. So one of our members in NGO Forum, a Bangladesh Bangladesh Resource Center for Indigenous Knowledge, what they did was they initiated a dialogue between different local communities who were working on seed and agriculture. And she communicated with farmer organizations facilitated by that NGO, and the NGO gave them a small amount of money to basically get a little plot of land in her homestead garden and plant local seeds from being completely, eradicated. The question was, how do you protect the seed? She then developed an integrated agricultural plan and started her journey on a very small piece of 33 decimal homestead land. ALPONA RANI keeps on proving her skill and confidence day by day. Hang on, let me just minimize this. Not only production, she's trying to search climate adaptive crop varieties and also resilient farming techniques. One of her areas of interest is also rice varieties which can handle high salinity. And that has been proven that the commercial seed was not capable of handling the high saline in the soil, but local varieties could. And she really is a champion of that. She has started experiments on bean diversity and also uncultivated food conservation. She's growing seasonal vegetables in an organic way and rearing livestock. She has planted rare trees, medicinal plants, fruit trees in her surroundings. She's producing compost and botanicals and selling it to other farmers and inspiring them to come into the local indigenous seed variety. ALPONA is one of the pioneers to introduce energy-saving, friendly, hand-woven handicrafts in the village. And her village is also known as the Friendly Woven Village. She practices traditional healing, and she's helping the poor with free primary health care. Her efforts have had such a tremendous impact that local government awarded her prizes, and her story is covered in local newspapers and such. All right. So her empowerment. ALPONA is an advocate, and she has now, with a larger following, has made a public statement of rejecting hybrid seeds and chemicals. She promotes exchanging local seeds and organic techniques to other women in her village and inspires them to take on the roles as trainers as well in organic agriculture. She continues challenging the market-driven chemical agriculture and helping rural families for their organic farm expansion. In Bengali, she said, Gachpala, Mati, Pani, Pakhi, Goru, সব নিয়ে আমাদের গ্রামীণ সংসার। এখানে একজনের কথা ভাবলে হয় না, সবার কথা ভাবতে হয়। এই শিক্ষা আমি আমার গ্রাম থেকে পেয়েছি। What it basically means is trees, land, water, birds, cows, with all this thing is our family. And you cannot think about just one individual, you have to think about the entire village. And this is the knowledge and education which she has learned from her ancestors. So case 2 is Sultana Parvin. And Sultana Parvin is kind of like a behind the scenes kind of a person who helped her neighbor Bilqis Begum. And they're kind of in the cusp between India and Bangladesh, which is also a very vulnerable, geopolitically sensitive area. Bilqis was struggling with a new infant daughter. Her husband got unemployed because of the floods. They have senior citizens to support, very, very desperate times. When Sultana Parvin, who's a local community villager herself, heard Bilqis's story, they decided, the women's groups decided to sort of figure out how they can help her out. So the members of the women group intended to do something that could supplement her family income. In the group meeting, they collectively decided to expand their traditional aesthetic needlework, which had some market demand. All BARCIK did was arrange, I think, a cup of tea and small breadsticks for these 30 women to come and sit and talk. That was the only intervention from civil society. The women ended up coming up with their own business plan. They started earning decent money. So what they did, as you can see here, is they do very, very fine needlework on existing material like saris and such. They worked very, very hard. They started linking up their little weaving project with the bigger cities and started getting orders for larger supply. And between that supply chain of bigger cities ordering this local weaving work, the NGOs played a very important role in bridging those business conversations along the way. Which brings us to my last case, HAWA AKTER. And she's unique in the sense she's also from the Indian side of the border. She was born in 1968, grade 8 education. She's a leader of her community mainly because she helped give voice to a landless community, which happened when private shrimp cultivating fishermen started land grabbing salt-laden water body areas. And that led her to a lot of recognition and respect in her village. Her aim in Ramjibon village was to build confidence of marginal women. She realized that due to having no cash in hand, the women could not find their voice, and that had to change. So she motivated the marginal women to get involved in bamboo cane weaving for earning cash. Now, she called this practice, or her organization or social, this cooperative as such, she called it HABADA, which is an acronym. Ha is for hat, Ba is for bash, Da is for Dao, which basically means hand, bamboo, and the knife with which you strike. So the HABADA movement successfully divided the village into 4 blocks. And they assigned the skilled women to oversee the activities of training and capacity building of other women to get into the bamboo weaving practice. HAWA AKTER herself was involved in village police training to ensure security of women was ensured and adolescent girls among the village people. The village people, though, never liked a woman to get involved in village police activities, yet her reputation preceded her, and she gained her respect. The HABADA association under her leadership started to get recognition from the Union Parishad, which is the local council. And she also had a voice in family disputes, which had tremendous impact, because at that point in time, there was no woman allowed in the jury council of these local conflict resolution places. So that continues to be, I think, a very significant move in social change at the local dynamic. She later on became a part of the Netrokona District's Coordination Committee, which looks at the local government's budget and decentralization in the sectors of agricultural, health, and education. So what did we learn from these 3 cases? We realized that there is something which needs to be categorized within each of these communities. And what needs to be categorized is, what are the skills available? What is the diaspora of that community? What is the age group? Who is the most vulnerable? Who needs to come into solidarity? Then, of course, is the need for civil society to understand that there needs to be connections made. Connections made not only within that community, but mediation between different institutions within that village dynamic. Of course, the organic social spirit of communities coming together to resolve a common need. As we saw, the issue of local seed was an organizing factor in the first case to bring people together. In the second case, the economic deprivation of one woman became a cause for collective consciousness among the rest. Similarly, in the third case as well. And this leads to further dialogue and, of course, understanding what is the community's capacity. How much can they produce? What is their area of expertise, and how can that get organized? So as civil society working in this space, the job was to facilitate the community organizing and be the interface between the communities and the businesses to build social enterprise supply chains. This was quite articulately provided in that journal article, which I previously mentioned, came from Mahidol University. So you have the categorization of related communities leading to dialogue with the communities, which uses the community capacity, leading to positive outcomes in communities. But between those different spaces, you have to build those connections through mediation. You have to ensure that there's trust and social solidarity within these communities. And it's not only about weaving or agriculture seed or bamboo weaving baskets. It's actually what happens after they become economically empowered. They resist hybrid varieties of seed and commercialization. They resist violence against women. They start influencing local government and distribution of resources and change the conversation towards progressive inclusivity. So in summary, I guess in conclusion, yes, we can build back better, and it's not new. We always knew how to do so. So I'll just stop there. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Ryan Hassan. So I don't know if it's coincidental that in the 3 examples he used, it was women who were featured, and which again shows that even in Bangladesh, where women are traditionally subordinate, they are able to successfully lead social enterprises that redound really to the well-being and the good of the community.